VocalEye Almost Live Zoom. Jane Martin, The Ties That Bind. Hosted by Amy Amantea, with special guest Fiona Wright.
Welcome to this VocalEye Almost Live event. My name is Amy. Most of you know me. I use she, her pronouns. I'm also the associate director here at VocalEye. I'm your host for these events, and I'm a member of the blind community. And I enjoy spending all of my Wednesday nights with you all. It makes me proud to be here, and I feel the warmth every time I'm in this space with you all. So thank you for making my Wednesday night better than any Wednesday nights have any business than being, to be honest, for the middle of the week. So thank you to you all for supporting VocalEye, for supporting me in the space, for making contributions, for sending in testimonials. It all is greatly welcomed and appreciated. We read them, we respond to them, we send them to our donors. They like to see the impact that this kind of programming is making on the community. So if you have something that you want to share with us, please do. If you happen to be watching this on our YouTube channel, of course, we want you to interact with us as well. You can hit like and subscribe. That would be wonderful. You can also connect with us through our newsletters. So you can subscribe there and check out our website at vocaleye.ca. There's lots of information and lots of ways that folks can connect with our organization. VocalEye is broadcasting to you all from the traditional and unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, in particular the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. So I live here on the North Shore. There's 3 municipalities here on the North Shore of Vancouver. So we're just over the Lionsgate Bridge, or on the other side of the Second Narrows Bridge, or the Ironworkers Memorial Bridge. Just at the base of Grouse Mountain is where I live. So the mountains that are known as the Lions, hence the Lionsgate Bridge, they're known as the Lions, and the mountains kind of look like 2 big peaks, and they're known as the Lions, kind of like the guardians of the land. So there's a legend here on the North Shore, because the North Shore here is Squamish land. And I just want to read to you a little bit of that legend. Now, of course, this is just a synopsis of the legend. It goes quite in depth, but I just want to read you what I was learning about in terms of my own neighborhood that I live in, and the folks that have taken care of these lands since time immemorial, and still are taking care of this land and sharing these stories from their ancestors through oral traditions. So here is my offering and what I have learned, and would love to share with you a bit of what I have learned. So now known as the Lions, the legend of the 2 sisters. Long ago, before settlers arrived, Squamish people lived in villages across the land, often engaging with conflict with neighboring nations. During this time, a great Squamish chief had 2 daughters known for their wisdom and kindness. One day, a great feast was held, and warriors prepared for battle against another nation. However, the 2 sisters, who believed in peace, approached their father and pleaded with him to stop the fighting. They reminded him that all people shared the same rivers, mountains, and sky. Moved by their words, the chief agreed to send gifts of peace instead of war. The act of kindness was so powerful that it ended the conflict, bringing harmony between the nations. The Creator saw the sisters' great love for their people and their role in bringing peace, so he transformed them into the 2 mountain peaks that stand above Vancouver's North Shore today, so they would forever watch over the land and remind people of the importance of peace. So as I live on the base of this mountain, just quite down from the base, but the base of Grouse Mountain, just where the 2 sisters are, known as the 2 Lions today, I am now going to refer to them as the 2 sisters, because I had no idea that there was this history in Squamish tradition and Squamish legend about these mountain peaks. And of course there would be, because the Lions is a colonized idea, and these mountain peaks have been here for eons. So I offer that because this land has been here long before any of us existed. And when Indigenous peoples were here, long before any settlers arrived, their relationship with the land and their relationship with their ancestors was taken away by settler folks. And so I think is a reminder to me in terms of how I relate to truth and reconciliation, learning the history of the two sisters and sort of renaming them as part of my neighborhood, bringing that name back, feels to me like the right thing to do in terms of truth and reconciliation. So they're no longer the Lions. I'm going to call it the Two Sisters Bridge instead of the Lions Gate Bridge. But in my mind now, the peaks are the two sisters. So I offer you that from my own backyard. Tonight's episode of Almost Live is our 174th, and it's Wednesday, February the 26th, 2025. And tonight's special guest is Fiona Wright. She's from the Carleton University, CUAG, short for CUAG for short. And the exhibition is Jane Martin, The Ties That Bind. So let's bring on my friend Fiona, because I need a
Hi,
sip
hi
of my
Amy. Hi
water.
everyone.
How are you, my lovely?
Good. I'm good. I'm so happy to be back. And yeah, hopefully there's some people who have been in the space, like been to one of our QEG exhibition tours before. So yeah, it'll be like
Oh,
visiting old friends.
there definitely
We
are.
like returning visitors. Yeah.
Yeah, there definitely are. There's a huge following here of folks that join on a very, very regular basis.
Oh, wow.
That's why we are a community unto ourselves, which is
Mm.
really nice. So, well, what have you been doing since the last time you were in the space? Just been busy.
Um, yeah, just been busy with the art gallery. We had a really nice summer of doing we kind of don't do exhibitions during the summer because we're a university art gallery. The campus is so quiet
Mhm.
over the summer, so we've decided to do more like performances, workshops, like panel discussions at the university's like downtown kind of art center.
Mhm.
So yeah, so it was a really fun summer for that. We had some really good events, and then yeah, and then back at it for the fall, which was really busy. And so this exhibition that I'm going to be talking about was one of our fall exhibitions, and the other two that we're doing this season are the other two exhibitions. So you're getting like a good sense of yeah what we've been up to at QA.
What's the mandate, in terms of like when you bring in an exhibition? Like, what are you looking for?
Oh, that's a good question. Usually. Usually contemporary artists, usually Canadian artists. Um, we like to, because it's a university art gallery, we like to work with emerging curators a lot. And so to have a kind of mentorship role, and then often emerging curators are tapped into really cool artist scenes that we wouldn't like normally know about. So yeah, so that's really cool. And then I think like with this one with the artist Jane Martin, um like she lived in Ottawa for a long time, though now she lives in Toronto and she's in her 80s. And so normally, or not normally, but like it's so common for people to want to show like young, hot, new, cool artists. And so we really found that having this retrospective of Jane's work and to show paintings from the 1970s to the 2000s and to really give this, woman Canadian artist this space, I think was like a really beautiful, yeah, beautiful moment. So yeah, it ranges, but we we like contemporary Canadian artists a lot.
What kind of background should we know about Jane Martin before we go into this retrospective? Because as you say, she's been an artist
Uh,
for a long time.
yeah, I have a little bio that I can read, but I can give you the kind of I can tell you it now. So basically, so she's been a practicing artist since the 70s. So having that kind of sustained kind of art practice, I think is incredible. And she lived in Ottawa between 1965 and 1986, and she really played an important role in the city's artistic community. And when we had this show, it was amazing to, have her friends, come and see it and be part of the opening. Um, Now she was a really big advocate for artists' rights. So in Canada, artists have, it's basically like a union is the kind of um, closest way I could describe it, called CARFAC. And yeah, so where we have like a list basically of artist fees. So like if you're in a solo show at this level of art gallery, you should get paid this much. If you are in a group show at an art gallery of this level, you should get paid this much. And so I think that is quite rare. Like when we work with artists from the United States, I think it's like the Wild West there, like sometimes
Yeah.
like it. So to have that kind of support for artists in Canada, I think is a really big deal. And Jane was definitely part of making that happen. So she has a huge legacy in that way. And now, so now she's in her 80s. She's unfortunately suffering from dementia. And so she was unable to come and visit the exhibition in person, but we made some nice videos for her. And yeah, I know that she's really happy that the show was put on.
Oh, that's nice. I benefit from Carfac. Although I wonder when the last
Yeah.
time that was actually updated. Considering the
Oh,
cost
it's
of
updated all the
inflation.
time. It's updated all the time. They just did a big
Right.
jump in fees. Yeah, yeah,
Perfect. Gotta love that.
yeah, yeah,
Because you rarely hear that in the arts.
yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
yeah. Okay. Well, I say we jump into things because I'm really excited to dive into this because Jane Martin has some really interesting pieces.
Mhm.
I don't want to make it sound like we need to throw up a content warning for some of this stuff, but there are
Mm.
some mediums because this is paint, right? This is paint medium.
It's painting, yeah, all painting, yeah.
Yeah. So, there's some paintings of the human body, and we don't have to get into specific details of that, but we'll do some general overviews. And of course, when we do the Q&A, if people want some more details, we can answer those questions. But Fiona, where do we want to start?
So we're going to start with photo one, which is basically it shows um, the exhibition as a whole. So I think we can pull up that first photo. Awesome, thanks, Rick. Okay, so the Carleton University Art Gallery, it has 2 floors and it's shaped like an L. And the exhibition that we're visiting is in the High Gallery, which is the room that forms the short stem of the L. And this photograph shows the exhibition when you enter the gallery from the first floor of our building. So there are 4 walls in this gallery. The front and the back wall are shorter, around 7 meters wide, and the side walls are longer. They're about 14 meters long. And we call it the High Gallery because the ceiling is double the height of the rest of the gallery, so about 6 meters high. And there's a balcony actually that overlooks this room, which can be accessed from the top or the mezzanine floor. And when you enter this show, it's all quite bright and white. All the walls are painted white, and the artworks have been hung in clusters, basically in a line that spans the length of each gallery wall, often reaching above your head. And on a small wall around the corner in large black letters, it reads Jane Martin, The Ties That Bind, curated by Diana Nemeroff. And I want to give you just an overview of Jane Martin's work. This is the first retrospective of Martin's work, and it takes its title from the ties, often literal, that express both the fulfillments and frustrations of the connections formed within human relationships, whether within the family, among friends, or in the intimate give and take of a couple. And the exhibition is divided into 3 parts, shown chronologically. In the first, spanning the 70s to the 80s, the artist examines themes of friendship and family life with a gaze by turns sentimental and sardonic. Then in the second part, Martin's works from the late 80s and early 90s chart the sensuality and suffering of the flesh. And in contrast, the third section of the exhibition focuses on the faithfully honest yet tender late portraits that Martin made of herself and her husband, the musician Ewan McQuaig. And so when I was giving tours of this exhibition last fall, I really focused on three big themes of relationships, representations of the body, and the idea of a retrospective, or how we archive or document our own life. So that's that description.
Okay. And if people don't know, retrospective is really like a collection of things throughout. It's like the best of.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Best of
And
album.
this, yeah, I should say too, so this was curated by Diana Nemiroff, and Diana, she actually used to be the director of the Carleton University Art Gallery for about 5 years, and before that, she worked at the National Gallery of Canada, and she had a real kind of friendship and love, with Jane Martin, and collected Jane Martin's work for the National Gallery of Canada, for the Carleton University Art Gallery. And so I really love that, that we invited her to curate this exhibition of Jane's work, because they have a connection.
So just to step out of Jane's work for just a moment and just talk about the process, because I'm curious about this, because some artists have an exhibition where it's the work is created specifically for that exhibition. And this is a retrospective. So now I'm curious about the process that the curator takes. So like a curator could go find an artist that has something unique to say about a specific topic, about a specific time. And that's an exhibition that they bring to the space, which is great. And I imagine that there are artists out there that have works that they're like, hey, here's my press release. And they're looking for galleries to also, bring their works into spaces. When you're curating a retrospective, are the pieces, I don't know how many pieces are in this collection, but are they already assembled as a retrospective?
No,
Or is the
no,
curator
no,
has to
no.
know? Okay, so the curator is like creating this exhibition
Exactly.
based on their knowledge and the pieces they think would go together from
Exactly,
the
exactly,
collection. Okay.
exactly. And I think, this exhibition is organized, very well, like, comprehensively, very, in an understandable way. But I'm sure that, that took a lot of work. And also these paintings came from all over, like
Yeah.
some, maybe like two, I think, are just from our collection. There were a bunch that were coming from the National Gallery of Canada, so we had to arrange loans for that. A lot were coming from Jane's house, like her personal collection, and so having to arrange for that. And often artists, they'll have, they are good at that admin part, creating an archive of their work, but sometimes not, and sometimes
Yeah.
it's about, kind of digging through. And I think the way that they wanted this exhibition to look was kind of taking a um, inspiration from how Jane hung her works in her house. She had this, or she still has this, like, big rambling Victorian house in Cabbagetown in Toronto,
Mhm.
and with artworks hung from floor to ceiling. You can imagine when you're an artist and you've been making work for decades, like,
Yeah.
all the walls are covered,
Where does it
are covered
go?
in
Yeah.
are covered, exactly. And so I think, with the way that the exhibition has been hung, in clusters, and with, paintings, on top of paintings on top of paintings, it was really meant to mimic that, yeah, that kind of beautiful chaos. It still looks like a kind of stark, you know, beautiful white cube, and all the galleries are hung at the right, or all the paintings are hung at the right angle, but just that kind of sense of how much work, like how you know, how many paintings she created over her lifetime, I think is nice to have here.
Right. Cool. I love that context because it takes a lot to be able to go through the catalog, so to speak, of all of the work and put together the story. And like you said, the works can be in all sorts of places. I can't even imagine the request for the pieces and the insurance on the pieces to have to ship them and
Yeah,
all of that
yeah.
stuff.
Even like the National Gallery, I think they ask for something like 2 years advance notice for
Oh,
if you want to
wow.
borrow something from them. And you have to be a certain like status of art gallery, with particular environmental conditions and
So
all
with
that.
that being
So
said,
yeah.
how long is this exhibition at CUAG or was at CUAG?
It was there for the whole fall. So I think it opened kind of mid-September and closed in mid-December. So I don't know what that's 4 months, 3 months. Yeah.
Okay, so it's a good chunk of time, especially if you have to wait
Yeah.
perhaps for 2 years for something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah, you better be a good planner to do this.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, Jane. Jane, you're not Jane. Fiona.
Yeah.
I'm channeling the Jane Martin.
Yes.
Where is Jane taking us next,
Yeah.
Fiona?
Yeah. So we're going to move so this is we're going to see photo 2. Um, and it's actually the first painting that is on that kind of first wall on your left. So this is the first painting that you see, and it's called Wedding Ribbons, and it is an oil painting, and it was painted in 1974. And the dimensions of this painting are 22 by 34 inches. And that first wall, it has 10 paintings on it, all done in the 1970s and 1980s. But as I mentioned, this is the kind of the earliest painting in the show from 1974. So the painting shows a man and a woman standing formally next to each other from about the knees up. As the title suggests, they are dressed in the traditional garb of a bride and groom. The woman on the left wears a white dress with long sleeves, and the man wears a brown suit. The background is a soft blue. The bride clutches pink flowers, perhaps roses, in her hands, holding them against her chest. The same pink is in the ribbon garland that forms an arch above the groom's head. There are pink streamers that crisscross in the background. A sweet small heart floats in the space between them. Jane's style of painting, however, undermines the initial feelings of simple happiness on an important occasion. The figures' faces are cartoonish, with tiny eyes at the very top of their faces, bulbous noses, and pudgy fingers. There are no smiles to be found. The groom appears not to be wearing a shirt, and his pink tie melts down his bare chest in gloves. And even more unnerving, the pink streamer decorations burst out of each of their shoulders so that they have the impression of puppets being held aloft. The ribbons have a ring-like texture of intestines, giving a body horror feeling to this usually optimistic and happy pose. And I'm going to read out the extended label for this artwork, which was written by curator Diana Nemroff.
Cool.
So pictures of the family, newly married couples, babies, parents, and children dominated Martin's work in the 1970s. These happy scenes are not without their underlying anxieties, however. Look carefully at the ribbons that decorate the background of this painting, and you will see that the expressionless figures of the bride and groom hang like puppets from ribbon-wrapped anchors. The ties that bind the couple in matrimony, happy or otherwise, are also constraints, symbolized in the ceremonies of the day and not entirely absent now by vows of protection and obedience. So that's the end of that description.
Isn't that interesting?
Yes. It took me a while, like it took me, I would say, a week to see that the the like, intestine ribbons were popping out of their shoulders. I like when you kind of just do a you know, preliminary glance at this painting, it looks very straightforward, and then it really takes kind of close looking to be like, oh, okay,
Oh, Rick,
something is more complicated here.
Rick, can you maybe zoom in on like chest up?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, I get
Yeah.
a little bit of what you're talking about here. Yeah, it's like they're hanging from a coat hanger almost. With with
Yeah,
like, but
absolutely.
from the intestines go through one shoulder and the other, and it's all. And I just noticed that
Exactly.
her hair is entangled in it too.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly, exactly.
yeah,
Yeah,
visually.
yeah. I think, yeah, when I was giving tours of this one,
Huh.
people were really pointed out um the like no smiles, you know, on their face, that they're not touching at all.
Yeah,
And you know, when you know, obviously like photos have always been taken, or always, but you know, photos have been taken of, you know, weddings. And the photos that are now, you know, taken of couples, they're very posed in these like gazing into into each other's eyes
yeah,
and
yeah,
lovingly embracing one another, and you know, looking, you know, in a field, you know, like
yeah.
wandering off into the sunset. And so we talked a lot about maybe like differences in like generational expectations for, you know, for when you're getting married, like um but that's still like those are still posed photographs, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, hopefully like the wedding day is the most happy, or one of the most happy days of your life, but no relationship is perfect. And I like that, um yeah, that Jane doesn't shy away from those kind of underlying, you know, structures and power dynamics and societal expectations. And so, you know, in this depiction of it, I believe it's her and her husband.
The facial expressions remind me of the stereotype of the passport photo,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
right? When
It's
you
like,
hear the stereotype, which is like, don't smile, don't
yeah,
be very neutral, like,
yeah,
um, because they're like apathetic about it. Take the
yeah,
picture,
exactly,
let's be
exactly.
done, time to move on, we got stuff to
Exactly,
do.
exactly. Yeah,
Like this is just a part of the process. Let's move forward, you know.
yeah, yeah,
Whereas you're right, today it's more like it's a big spectacle, it's a production.
totally,
Yeah,
totally, totally.
yeah,
I also love like the color of Ewan's suit is like this kind of mustard brown, so it feels very 70s, you know, aesthetic.
I
So
hate to
I love
I hate
that.
to say this because I would not have known that these were intestine, because they don't look like intestines, they look like ribbon, but when you point it out you're like, oh,
Oh yeah?
yeah, okay, I
Oh,
get that. Yeah, for my
yeah.
eyes I wouldn't have recognized that. um but now that you're saying that his suit is this mustard color, it's almost the color of bile.
Yeah,
Just
yeah, yeah, totally.
it just
And
is.
like there are parts that are melting, like his tie that's melting down his chest. Like
Ah,
it sort of reminds me of like a tongue. You know how like your tongue, like you can
yeah.
sometimes like
Your tongue gets, yeah.
the bumps on your tongue. Sort of reminds me of that. So that's why I love, yeah, just spending time with a painting, and the more, you know, details that you notice. And
Hmm.
even like sometimes um a student would point out even like the way that the bride is holding her flowers, like clutched. That's why I use that word, like clutched against her chest. Like that's her kind of comfort. And roses come up again and again. It's something that she paints a lot. So
Yeah.
it's also something that, you know, one of the things that's interesting in a retrospective, you know, because she was making paintings from the 1970s up into the 2000s, like what changes, but what stays a constant, right?
Yeah.
What is always important to her. And I think,
So
yeah, relationships and roses, I would
you
say.
said this painting was painted in the 70s. What year was it?
Yeah, 1974.
74. Do we know what year she was married?
I don't know, but I think that this is, I don't, yeah, so I don't know if this is, if she painted this like the year that she was married, so she was married in 1974, or
Yeah.
maybe she
A look
waited a
back.
couple years and then painted it. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Cool. I
Yeah.
like it. I'd be
Yeah, this is
interested
a,
to
yeah,
know if
not
there was
photograph.
actually a wedding photo that looked like this. Obviously not with the flesh, but
Right,
but
right.
if there were if they're if they stood side by side with these sort of apathetic faces,
Yeah.
that'd be interesting.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know she painted from, we'll get to a section where she's painting directly from photographs, but I'm not sure if she did that from, I don't think she did that like from the beginning. So this might
Okay,
be kind of in her imagination.
cool.
Yeah.
All right. Where is Jane gonna take us
Yeah.
next, Fiona?
So we're moving forward a decade with photo 3. And this is another painting, another oil painting. And this is called Clematis Ramona, and it was painted in 1983. And the overall dimensions are pretty similar, so 24 by 28 inches.
What is
So, oh, sorry.
sorry, just having trouble making 24 by 28 in my brain.
Oh,
What is
24
that?
would be like 24 would be 2 feet. So 2 feet by like a little bit more than 2 feet.
So that like the wrist to my shoulder roughly? 2 feet ish?
Yeah, yeah, oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, that's fairly
Yeah,
sizable.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah, they're
thank you.
not overly large. Like they're not epically large paintings. Like they're very manageable paintings, I would say.
Okay, that's helpful for me. Thank you.
Yeah. So okay, so this painting is hung a few feet down from wedding ribbons and painted about 10 years later. So I like doing a compare and contrast with my students when we're on tour of this exhibition. So with this one and wedding ribbons. So in this painting, there is a couple, presumably Jane and her husband Ewan, and they're posed much more intimately though. The husband is on the left, just behind and beside the wife, with one of his arms around her shoulder in a gesture of familiarity. They have the same small eyes and knobbly fingers, and he is wearing a bright yellow shirt, perhaps a pajama top, and she a light blue tank top or negligee. That strange tension between beauty and horror is present here as well. Pink ribbons, not intestines this time, descend from the top right and wrap around the wife's throat. Her right arm has been amputated above the elbow, and the same pretty pink ribbons wrap around the stump. There's also a canvas behind this canvas. The pair are painted on what looks like a square piece of cloth with grommets along the bottom edge and the top 2 corners. And pink ribbons thread through them and hold the fabric aloft. The back to this is a dense display of light purple clematis flowers. So here is a text that's written about similar paintings. So this is kind of a more general one. So Martin's figures have been described as grotesque and her intentions as satirical, but she defends herself against any suggestions she is not serious, observing, quote, "What I'm interested in, to the exclusion of all other subjects, is people. I try to paint us with an emotional and sensual accuracy. Like insects pinned up for scientific observation, this pair has been strung up and secured by slits in the pastel wallpaper with pink ribbons, helpless to defend themselves from our prying eyes. Everything is revealed, but the inner drama of the couple remains hidden. Martin's titles often draw our attention to the backgrounds of her paintings, as if to put us at ease after parting the curtains on the intimacies of domestic life. Here, the flower suggests something about the couple's bond. Um, these flowers are associated with long life and good fortune. So that's the end of that description.
It's interesting that I mean, I could I understand why people would describe this as grotesque. However, they're really quite beautiful. Like they're not
Yeah,
scary, they're
yeah.
not gruesome. They're not,
Hmm.
you know, when we talk about amputated arms and things like that, it tends to sound like we're watching a zombie film, which is not at
Hmm.
all what this is, right? Like there are beautiful pastel colors, there are beautiful, like it's really just about, I think for me when I'm in the space of this work, I feel like um you know, like Jane says, it's a different way of showing. It's kind of like showing, you know, the phrase wearing your heart on your sleeve.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
This feels to me like all of these images are these folks wearing their emotions on their body somehow,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
in this kind of way. And if I relate, you know, like you could relate this to disability in a lot of ways.
I
Um,
was just that yeah, that was just going through my through my mind actually.
yeah,
Um, and I'm surprised it didn't come up in my mind when I actually was in the show.
yeah,
But yeah, I think like for me and this comes up in the next work as well. Like it's about the kind of emotional, intimacy and emotional sense of self, and especially in relation to your partner.
hmm,
Um, but it's also about the body and how we live in our body, how we understand our body. And so I think it's really important to not separate those two things,
yeah,
that
yeah.
often like in Western society we separate out like, what's going on in like our true self is our mind and our body is just like what holds us. but
Yeah.
but actually we are our body. They're so intricately linked. And she really doesn't shy away from that. And something that that impacts one will impact the other. Absolutely.
It's really quite fascinating. Honestly, it's really quite fascinating.
Hmm.
Um, what?
And it is so pretty. Like it's pretty. It's domestic. Like these domestic
Oh
scenes.
yeah,
These
yeah.
like this is. I think even though we don't see any furniture, I imagine this to be in a bedroom. I think that's why I thought, okay. I mean, I don't know for sure, but that's why I think I thought, oh, this is a pajama top. That's maybe that's a nightgown or a
Yeah.
negligee. Like these are um, like it feels yeah, that we're in a kind of public space and she's giving us so much of herself and her relationship with you and that we see here. And I wonder too, like when this show opened in September, I had just been married a month. I got married in August.
Mm,
And so you know these paintings that are done that show a relationship over decades, right? And what can happen between a couple over that time, um and what changes and how do you become more intimate, and but how do you hurt one another, emotionally,
yeah.
and give each other scars, emotionally, intentionally or not. Like what happens over when you're with someone for so many years. And I think that these paintings really show like the beauty, and then but also sometimes the pain of that as well.
You know, a friend of mine um, uses this analogy. I don't know if it fits with this, but for me, it kind of fits. Uses this analogy about like language around disability. So this person is autistic and uses they them pronouns, right? And so they say that you know, for them, when they're out in the world and you know people make fun of their autism or you know their lived experience, it's like a bee sting. And so you know you get one bee sting every 6 months and it's not really that big a deal, but if you get 50 bee stings a day, it really really hurts, and sometimes it can be fatal, right? This idea
Hmm.
of, you know, the death of a thousand paper cuts.
Yeah, yeah.
But kind of this idea of, you know, maybe in this one, we hurt the ones we love, and over time, you know, that one bee sting is 1,000
Mm-hmm.
bee stings until you
Mm-hmm.
just are so, you just can't, you know, you're either so numb or you're so poisoned you can't, you're not yourself anymore.
Well, exactly, yeah. And I think that's, yeah, that's what, like, there's the style that she does is not hyper realistic. It's not photorealistic at all. That
Yeah,
the figures are, are cartoonish. They have a very
yeah,
particular style. It's not, even though the colors are very romantic and soft and, and feminine, like the figures themselves have not been, she hasn't painted them as that,
yeah,
as
yeah,
models or, in like, in the best possible light. It's so raw.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Jane.
Yeah.
It really makes you ask a lot of things about yourself, which I
Yes,
think
that's
that's
why I
what
think I
artists
found it
do.
sometimes on, yeah, exactly. I think that's why I found it on, like, it was, this one kind of struck like uncomfortably close to home sometimes. It was,
Well, I'm
it was
sure that you
interesting
didn't use the
show to be
wedding
part of.
photo that Jane painted on your wedding
Yeah.
invitations.
No, no, no. And we eloped anyway.
Well,
There
there
were
you
no
go.
limitations. Yeah.
Um, awesome. Okay. Fiona, what do
Okay,
you
so we can
hand?
go to, we're going to photo 4 now. Okay, so this is an installation shot, so an overall shot of the back wall of the exhibition. And so it would kind of sequentially come after the wall of the paintings that we just talked about with her and her husband from the 1970s and the 1980s. So as I mentioned, the wall is very tall, and the curator has hung 13 quite large paintings so that they take up almost the entirety of the wall, hung, 3 paintings high, and it stretches, far above our heads. The dimensions of the paintings vary, but they're all around 28 by 31 inches. So even longer than 2 feet, like more almost like 3 feet by 3 feet. And the overall feeling is one of a crowded wall. And as I mentioned, it's meant to emulate how Jane's paintings were displayed kind of higgledy-piggledy in their large Victorian home in Toronto's Cabbagetown, where the walls were crammed with works by her and her artist friends. So these paintings were all done in the late 80s and early 90s. And gone are the more recognizable human figures. And here instead are pieces of vulnerable pink flesh and skin, often limbless and strung up with ribbons, hung on a clothesline or encased in dark and heavy wooden Victorian cabinetry. Often the backdrops are very detailed and colorful floral wallpaper, painstakingly hand painted. And I wanted to show you this installation shot rather than focus on a specific painting to demonstrate both the kind of her extended focus on the body, and particularly women's bodies, and the overwhelming and, you know, quite honestly, what could sometimes be a disturbing scene that it made for visitors to the exhibition. And I'll read out the extended label that's written about one of these paintings. In the Rapture paintings, so that was the series name of most of these paintings was called Rapture, Wrapture, Rapture.
Right. So
And
wrapped. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, yeah. So you can imagine, yeah, like the wrapping of with like ribbons or kind of constricted. In the but also like Rapture,
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway,
A double
um,
entendre.
exactly. In the Rapture paintings, Martin gradually abstracts the scarred human torso until it begins to resemble a ripped cushion, held together by strips of fabric and displayed on armatures that recall an artist's easel. Her sardonic sense of humor makes its appearance in an image that simultaneously suggests a carcass and a little girl's party dress. The title is a play on wrapping and rapture, a state of joy or ecstasy, while wrapping aims to contain and perhaps, as here, deny the pain of lived reality or disguise it with humor. So
We
that's the
probably
end of
should
it.
have zoomed in on that one.
I don't, unfortunately,
Okay.
off the top. Oh, actually, where would it be? Um, Rick, it might be the 11 and 12 off to the side. Oh, no, I know what it is. Sorry, it's number 3.
There are 13 photos in this one, so.
So here, number 3, yeah, the one that's specifically about. So yeah, it's a kind of, it looks like a big piece of flesh, like pink flesh, that's kind of tied at the 4 corners to, yeah, kind of what would maybe be an artist's easel. And then the pink flesh has these kind of 3 ribbons that go down it, also made of pink flesh. So yeah, I found like if you, I found this wall particularly hard to be in front of because there's pain here. Um, and there's similarities to, like, you can see how these are works by the same artist, and I had mentioned that kind of very, very detailed backgrounds of like floral wallpaper, or even like where she pushes the representations of the body even further, like lopping off more limbs, or the heads, or giving bleeding scars. So kind of pushing what we've seen in the first two, even further. And but it makes me like I'm glad that the curator sees kind of humor in it, but yeah, there is pain that's really represented here, and um, I think with these, I know in particular, for example, she had to have a hysterectomy around this time, and so in with this wall, yeah, I would talk about, how do we navigate changes to our body as we age, and um and the way that we, yeah, our relationship to our body, and particularly as women, um, when that comes up against how we think we should be, how we think we should look, how our skin should look, how different parts of our body should look, um, and how little control we have, we have over that as the years go by, um, and here I think Jane is really putting that on display. Those constrictions, those structures, those systems um, that really can take away that control.
Mm. Yeah, we had talked a little bit before we invited our audience in tonight about the reference to the medical system, perhaps. When you are experiencing something like a hysterectomy, or and I can't help but relate that to the experience of disability for some folks, where they are experiencing, the medical model of disability, or, that they are going into a place where it's all about you're broken, you need to be fixed, or you are not a person, you are just the thing that
Yeah.
needs to happen on the table, right? You're the specimen. And
Yeah.
that's kind of what some of this reminds me of, is just like, these are pieces of flesh, but they're just the specimen. That's all they are.
Yeah,
But when
exactly.
she, when Jane attaches it to this framework, like an artist who is making a cushion pillow would have done,
Mm-hmm.
relating it to some
Totally.
sort of everyday beautiful thing.
Yeah, yeah. There's still that hyper femininity, that and even like that interior space. Like so much of her paintings are set in the home,
Yeah,
this safe space that her and Ewan created in their Victorian home.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I like that. I like that association. But
Visual.
yeah, even like, oh, sorry.
No, no, please.
Or yeah, just like, even, yeah, just to continue on that point. Yeah, like whenever, like, for example, I went through, like, I had to work with a fertility clinic, and me and my partner did IVF, and for like 3 years. And so for 3 years, basically it was like a hyper focus on like my uterus,
Yeah.
and so I became like, it was like, what's like, I just became that,
Yeah.
like that part of my body. And so that would be like that kind of pain and frustration and lack of control. That would be what was always coming up for me with this wall. And so yeah, I found that difficult too. But then yeah, but then it was so good to talk about with people, and people both who were like in undergraduate, in their undergraduate degrees, and who are 18, 19, 20, and bringing like such interesting comments about media representations of women's bodies, and and expectations about how they should be, and then also going through the exhibition with women who were part of like retiree groups, and how they related to these works in a different way. So it was
Hmm.
always really great to have those different conversations.
So, visual question for you. Um,
Mm.
if you didn't know that this was supposed to be flesh, is that visually obvious? If somebody hadn't told you that this was representative of skin or flesh, or would you just think that it was, a
Yeah, like
pinkish colored
fabric or something.
fabric? Yeah. I'm
No,
just
to
trying to
me,
provide some sort of context for
yeah,
air
yeah,
quotes grotesque.
yeah. Maybe Rick, could you zoom out to see the wall again? I think, yeah, it can. Like I find it pretty obvious, especially because of like
But when
the
the
tone of it.
body parts are really obvious, yes.
Yeah, there's some that like are very obvious body parts, and then she uses those same colors of paint, and it's interesting too, like the earlier paintings, the 70s and 80s ones, often the skin is quite flat, like she's just using one shade of pink,
Mm-hmm.
and then when she moves on to these works from the 90s, there's a real like depth, like shadows and like the folds and wrinkles and scars of all different pink tones, and especially like the like 11 and 12 on the right there, where the flesh looks like it's hanging on clotheslines, where yeah, you could kind of mix it up with like sheets, or like, or shirts like hanging on the line, but um but yeah, just the kind of
Yeah.
quality of the texture that she's been able to paint. Yeah, it's kind of unforgettable, or kind of not, you can't push away that, okay, I think this is skin. I think this is flesh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I don't want to overlook the fact that you and I are Caucasian, pale colored folks,
Yes, yes,
and this
yes.
is Caucasian, pale colored, pink flesh. Has there
Hmm.
been any thoughts or comments or conversations around folks that are of different flesh tones in conversations around this exhibition, and how they
That's a good
react to this or
question.
see themselves in this or
I
don't?
wouldn't. I mean, yeah. The Carleton student body is so diverse. So, but no, no one brought that up actually. I think, yeah, it's such a personal project, so I'm not surprised that Jane, focused on,
Sure.
on her own skin tone. Um, but it is a kind of specificity of experience. I think, the way maybe I was talking about it before was like, oh, all women go through this, but of course, it's not necessarily true, or that people from different races would have
Yeah.
um, more no, more different nuances of that experience,
Yeah.
right? Different systems or pressures. Yeah.
It's just for me it's a reminder, it's an interesting reminder. This is not a criticism of Jane at all, because I know that this is her experience. um,
Mhm.
that how easily the world has been convinced, that the world, maybe the Western world, has been convinced that this is the color of human flesh,
Oh, totally. Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Right, this is
yeah,
the default color of human flesh, so when we say flesh,
yeah,
yeah, it's pink. Yeah, of course it is.
yeah.
What other color would it be, right?
Right,
But
right.
I just wanted to point that out for folks, that
Yeah.
this is coming from a white woman's perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
which could be very different if it was a person of color's perspective.
Yeah. And well, one thing that would come up was also that it's representations of a long-term relationship, but specifically uh, a I would say heterogeneous heterosexual
Yep.
heterosexual relationship. Yeah. Yeah, but between a man and a woman, and so there those specificities though
Yeah.
as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we talk a bit about these three photos in the middle?
Oh, sure. Was maybe seven. Yeah, what's the five, six, and
Maybe
seven?
you can do some description of
Uh,
those.
sure, yeah. So with paintings five, six, and seven, so um, each one is a door of a like a dark wooden Victorian cabinet. So you can see the kind of frame of the dark wood, and then there would be kind of the glass, I guess, like the glass window pane, and really inspired by that kind of furniture she had in her house. And here the flesh, it's like it's been contained or pushed right into the cabinets, and it's like trying to pop out of those windows. And even there's kind of been parts of the flesh that are wrapped around each corner. So like I don't know if you're like trying to frame something something not quite flat. There's that sense of it. And then what really fascinates me about these works too that keeps coming up is yeah, this kind of hyperfixation she had on painting the wallpaper. So in each of them there's on the left there's it's kind of red on orange, like a red floral motif on orange. In the middle one it's a kind of maroon or brown floral motif on yellow. And on the one on the right it's a kind of a dark blue floral motif on turquoise. And so in every tour, the people, someone would ask me, like, did she use a stencil for that, or is that all hand painted? And I believe they're all hand painted. And to me, I think this was a good place to bring up labor, like artist labor,
Mm,
and how many hours it must have taken to um to do that, and how why she decided to, like, it would have been almost painful. Like I can imagine her hand kind of getting cramped, or
hmm.
having to work on it over an extended period of time. Um and so that makes me think, one about, that these are representations of the kind of the flesh in pain, the body in pain, or the body under duress, and kind of mimicking that, or having that come out in the way that she's actually painting. Um, but also, but also wanting to, respect the labor of an artist, that it is work, that this is, you know, Jane's life's work are these paintings, and the intention and dedication and that she brought to it, yeah, should really be kind of, called attention
Hmm.
to. Yeah, so yeah, that's why I like pointing out that wallpaper.
Yeah, they're kind of like they're like this flesh is almost like it's bursting from the frames. It's got that kind of
Yeah,
3D
exactly.
sense, like
Yeah,
it's being held back, but it wants to come out. It wants to,
yeah. I think sometimes it'll come
it's
up,
being held back.
there's the kind of constructed, um not depict constructed, um the construction of, like, women always associated with the domestic sphere, with the house,
Yes. Yep.
and men always associated with the public sphere.
Yep.
And so here, yeah, when we're talking about those, what were the expectations that she felt on her body and herself as a woman,
Yeah.
and was that associated with the home, with domestic life, and I do, yeah, and but to complicate that too, because I know that their house was their haven, that they it was a space of joy and love.
Yeah. For sure. All right. Shall we check out? I think we just have one left.
Two.
Two. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. I was worried that there was just one left. Two. Here we go.
Yeah. Yeah, two. Okay, so this is another photograph that shows a series of paintings. So there are actually 9 paintings on this wall, but I'm going to be talking about just 6 of them that are from a series called Fabulosity that she painted in 2009. And each of these paintings is a square, 2 feet by 2 feet. So the next wall is the longest in the gallery, and the paintings stretch down it from one end to the other, often above and below each other, though not as high as the last wall. I want to focus on this series of 6 works, which are all photorealistic paintings of Jane's husband, Ewan. They are based on Polaroid photographs, hence the square shape, that Jane took of him while he was undergoing treatment for a brain tumor in 2001. So 4 of the paintings depict his face and head. I'm going to use the numbers beside each painting for Rick to zoom in on. Okay, so in number 2, okay. So in number 2, Ewan has a bare chest, graying hair, and one of his eyes is kind of bloodshot and almost kind of misshapen, kind of drooping, and it looks quite painful. And in number 3, should be the one right below. His head lies on a doctor, well, like his body, but it shows his head. His head lies on a doctor's table, covered in a white mask with drawn dotted lines and markings that map out his upcoming surgery. And these 2 have that highly detailed floral wallpaper background in orange and red.
That's the mask that covers your entire face, that keeps you still, that identifies where the radiation goes so that your radiation is delivered in the right spot.
Exactly. Okay, so in another portrait, number 5, he looks directly at us, his head on a pillow, and his kind of his hair, his head is wrapped in white bandages that match the sheets on the bed.
His eye doesn't seem to
And
be droopy in this one either.
yes, yeah,
So
yeah,
he
no
looks,
bloodshot eye.
yeah, he looks healthier in this one than he did in the first one.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And then in number 6, this one is a close-up of the side of his head post-surgery. So half of his head has been shaved, and there's a new curved scar that kind of curves in a kind of a backward C shape above his ear. And then I think you can just zoom out for this one, Rick, because the 2 paintings are kind of far apart. But so on either side, number 1 shows Ewan's torso. And so it cuts off his head a little bit. You can see his chin, but it's mostly his torso. And it looks quite vulnerable and naked. And then in number 7,
Can we just get a close up of
sure, of number 1, yeah.
of number 1? Yeah, so he's really, 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 really skinny. But flabby, like a lot of loose skin, right? Like when you've lost a lot of weight and the skin is loose and saggy. So my guess is as he was getting sick, he was losing a lot of weight. That would be my guess.
Yeah.
He's got that emaciated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then in number 7, so on the other side of the, or on the end of this line of paintings. So it's a kind of top-down view of Ewan in the bathtub. So he lies in the bathtub, kind of gazing up, but he's not. It's not a kind of strong gaze, like looking into our eyes. His head is kind of tilted off to the side. His gaze is off to the side, and then his arms, or his hands rather, are kind of resting on his chest and his stomach.
Sadly, it's very reminiscent of what a coffin pose would be.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I will. So yeah, let's zoom out again,
But he's got
and
his
I'll
hair.
read.
He's got his hair back in that
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, that's true. I
Yeah.
don't know, so I'm not sure if these were done or if these are displayed chronologically, um, or if it was just,
Mm.
yeah, Diana, the curator, thought this was the kind of best kind of placement for them.
Yeah.
But I'll read the extended label that was written about 2 of these paintings. Okay. So when her husband Ewan was diagnosed with a brain tumor in 2000, Martin photographed him after his surgery and continued to chart his illness with her Polaroid camera until his death in 2001. The drawings and paintings that followed later retained the realism of the photographs as a, quote, act of remembering.
Mm-hmm.
Martin also recorded Ewan's oddly poetic use of language as he attempted to express what was happening to his brain as his disease progressed and his perceptions of the world around him. Her title, Fabulosity, What Grew in There by False, combines his description of full-blown roses and his understanding of his illness. Her husband's poetic language was an outward sign of the inner ravages of the glioblastoma.
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 Glioblastoma. Yeah.
Glioblastoma, thank you. The ravages that the glioblastoma was wreaking on his brain. In her drawings and paintings, Martin was intensely interested in documenting the science-based medical treatment he underwent. In the portrait with the white mask, on his face,
Mm-hmm.
Ewan's face is obscured by a radiation mask. The notations on its surface mapping the points within his brain where the beams of radiation will be directed. Martin's painting preserves every detail she observed, down to the clamp that holds the mask in place, but she adds a flowered background in vivid red that seems to signal her contained emotions. Okay, so that's the end of this description.
Mm. This one really strikes a chord with me because I've lost 2 people in the last 2 years that have had glioblastomas. So
Oh, really? Oh my
yeah,
goodness.
it's very unexpected. You don't know that you've got it until you have it diagnosed, and it progresses really quickly.
I think, yeah, if, here I often talk about, that she thought to take these photographs as this was happening,
Mm-hmm.
with that theme of retrospective and remembering, like how do we document our lives? How do we archive our lives? That she thought to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And then even further, like almost 10 years later, wanted to turn them into paintings. And what did that time do,
Yeah.
to her understanding of that experience? And what did painting those things, again, because painting takes a long time, it's really really detailed, these are hyper realistic. How did it feel to spend so much that time with these paintings?
Yeah, back in
And
this world. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, and hopefully it was I hope it was a kind of healing, um healing process, or
Mm.
maybe it was a kind of a memorial as well,
Yeah.
and I think too, these are vulnerable. Again, like she's showing such vulnerability. These are so vulnerable, but in quite a different way than the ones from the 70s and 80s, where it was, she painted paintings of, her and her husband masturbating, or like in very kind of intimate, intimate poses.
Wow. Yeah.
And here, here this is so intimate, but in such a
Different
and
way.
vulnerable, but in such a different way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Just gonna let that marinate for a moment because that's a real
Yeah.
that's a real life. But how interesting that his sort of medical journey relates to the work we saw previously with kind of her medical journey.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
So it's
Yeah,
there's
the focus on the
themes.
flesh, the focus
Yeah,
on the
yeah, yeah,
body.
yeah.
Yeah,
Themes coming through.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And of course, as you said from the beginning, how different her technique has become from the 70s
Hmm.
through the
Hmm.
2000s.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, why was it important here that the paintings are so realistic?
Yeah.
Is there a kind of, how does that, I think there's something interesting there about memory, maybe.
Yeah.
Um, or like a visceralness, or like a, that Diana would talk about some of her paintings being about suppressing pain or hiding pain, or yeah, things that are hidden. But here it's so on display.
Mm-hmm.
She's not turning away.
Yeah. All right. I'm ready for the last one. What do we got?
Okay. Okay, so this is a painting. So we're going back in time a little bit to 1996, and this painting is called Ewan's Christmas Cabinet. Yeah, Ewan's Christmas Cabinet Polyptych. So um, that's like a fancy art word for like a painting that's comprised of multiple parts. Okay, so and this is another oil painting, and this one's quite a bit larger than the other ones that we've seen. So 35 inches by 51 inches. So yeah, what's that like? What's yeah, like over like 3 to 4 feet maybe across. Um, okay, so usually by this point in the tour, I was feeling very down generally about life and about relationships and about my body. And after the first tour that I gave, I ran up to my director, Sandra, and said, please, like you have to tell me some nice things about this couple. And she did tell me some nice things, some very nice things, which I'll tell you tell you all, and I'll kind of ground it in this beautiful and simple painting of a dark wood Victorian style cabinet. The cabinet takes up the whole canvas, though the background is that usual kind of busy floral pattern with reddish orange small blooms densely packed on a turquoise. It has 4 legs and 3 sections. In the middle, there are 5 drawers, and on either side, there are 2 larger glass doors. The glass has been packed with deep purple and magenta and white roses, which Jane dried and put into the cabinet as decoration. And so here's the extended label written about this painting. This painting is part of a 5-panel polyptych depicting roses that Martin had grown, dried, and crowded into the Sheraton china cabinet that she gave her husband on their first Christmas on Rose Avenue in Toronto. Martin acknowledged the departure from her depictions of the female body, saying that although her symbolic language had shifted away from the political and metaphorical associations of the female body, her interest in roses was, quote, heightened by the fact that, like the body, they are culturally encoded, historically and personally potent objects. Thinking through roses is like thinking through the body, only safer. And there's she had another quote in another section where she basically she got into a car accident in the late 2000s on the 401, and had quite a concussion, and it was hard to paint for a while, and she really focused on her rose paintings. her and Ewan were like great gardeners, and they had a huge backyard full of roses. And she said she kind of painted her way back to life through these roses.
Mm.
And so yeah, some of the nice things that Sandra told me about Jane and Ewan, because I was like, oh, like, we were talking about all, anyway, it was just it was so heavy that, the exhibition felt so heavy. And so I wanted, her to tell me what are some nice things about Jane and Ewan and their relationship. And they had a very strong, very long, very loving relationship. And they really centered their life on art and art making and music. So Ewan was a professional organ player. He worked at a church around the corner from their home, and they would go to plays and concerts and art shows. And they had a very strong circle of friends that they would do things with. And they had a very um strict, yeah, like strict tradition of every day Ewan would walk home at lunch, and they would at lunch, and they would have their kind of midday meal together.
Aw.
And so yeah, so that was really nice. So I kind of loved ending the tour on that kind of more happy note, I would say.
That's really sweet.
Yeah. I think this, I mean, I didn't focus it on much just because I was saving it for this one, but there are paintings that were kind of peppered throughout the exhibition, kind of smaller paintings peppered throughout the exhibition of roses. Like that she was
Mm.
a great rose gardener. And it came up with Ewan, describing fabulosity, what a rose, you know, feels like and smells like and looks like when it's in full bloom, and how fantastic that is.
Wow. And these pieces are like this set of drawers is likely, I'm guessing, still in her home in Cabbage House. Cabbage. My brain today. My brain. Cabbage
Yeah.
Town.
Okay.
Her
I
home in
think so.
Cabbage Town.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. She doesn't live in that home in that house anymore. She lives in a,
Yeah,
supported
I
living
imagined.
environment. But uh yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I think she might still have kind of her apartment in the house, and then she rents out other sections of the house now as well. But I
Oh,
don't know.
interesting. What it must be like to be a renter in a home that was like
Yeah,
such an amazing artist and such an interesting part of
yeah,
town. Um,
yeah, it's true.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, so
Well,
that's
that's the end of
Jane's
the
Jane's
tour.
life. Yeah,
But we're
yeah,
gonna do a little Q&A. So thank you
yeah.
for the tour. Appreciate that. Because I imagine there may be some questions from some folks. I know I can always fill the space with questions, but I'm curious because you mentioned now that Jane is living with Alzheimer's or dementia. Do we know when the onset of when her onset of dementia happened? Because I guess I'm wondering when her last painting, her
Her
last painting.
so towards the end of her painting time, she stopped doing paintings and started doing drawings on a smaller scale. So the kind of back wall that I didn't have any examples of there, but are the works from later in her life. And it was basically like smaller drawing versions of the same kind of subject matter that we've seen in her paintings. And there's one really beautiful one that is a portrait of both her and Ewan when he was in hospital, and it's kind of their faces in profile side by side, but them in the hospital together, that I really like. That's from her collection.
Mm. So she's still
Yeah.
active sort of in her art practice. It's just in a different way.
Yeah, she was. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, no. But yeah, in the kind of early 2000s, like 2009, I guess. Yeah,
Yeah.
that would probably be the last one.
We've got a hand from Megan, so let's see what Megan has to say. Come on in, Megan.
Yes. I like when you did when you and then and you described the first one about the ribbon, like the streamers hanging.
Oh, the
coming
wedding ribbons, yeah.
It almost felt like almost like they weren't smiling. I thought, it kind of felt Muslim because the woman is kind of married up to someone she doesn't know, almost that kind of thing. Like they're forced to marry someone they don't even know in the Muslim culture.
Talking about arranged marriages?
Yeah, that.
That's
I
in
wonder,
many,
I
that's
mean,
in many
sometimes,
cultures, so we don't need to call out one specific culture.
It
But I
almost
think they know each other, right, Fiona?
yeah, they knew,
Yeah,
they knew each,
they knew each
each
other.
other, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. And
Yeah.
did she have any children, and where was she born?
That's a good question.
Where was she born? I think she was just born in Toronto. And then she did her master's at Carleton, so that might have been why she moved to Ottawa in the 60s.
Ottawa and Carleton. Okay. And Carleton.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
And then
okay.
yeah, and then moved back to Toronto in kind of the late 80s.
Nice. Cool.
Yeah.
And did you say, Fiona, if she had any children?
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, I don't believe she had any children, no.
Oh, okay. Oh, cool. Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Megan. So
You're welcome.
as grotesque as it sounds, because she's aging, what happens to these pieces once Jane Martin has passed on? When she gets to join her hubby?
I don't know actually. Yes, I don't know, to be honest. I know that, she has a will set up
Yeah.
and different gifts that she will be giving in her will. But I don't know, I don't know the specifics. I was just thinking, I wonder if
I bet you CUAG's on that list.
yeah, I was like, I wonder if we get those paintings. Yeah.
Because it would almost be interesting too if her home in Cabbagetown, not that we want to evict any renters, but if it became a Jane Martin gallery. With
Yeah, that does happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Ben's got a hand. Come on in, Ben.
Okay, so remind me, it is, correct me if I get your name wrong. Can you help me with the name?
This is Fiona.
Oh, Fiona?
Fiona,
And then the artist. Oh,
I got two questions for you.
Okay.
What inspired this to come to VocalEye? Side note, is there a web-based page that would talk about the history of this work that we saw? So not just the pictures, but it would have like a write-up.
Yes, we did a e-publication. It's a PDF, but I'm pretty sure it's like web accessible. And I can put that link in the chat.
Why don't you email it to us, Fiona, and we'll circulate it. Ben, in the follow-up email. That way everybody can access it and they don't have to worry about scrambling to get it from the chat.
Yep. And then I had a question for you behind the scenes there.
Mm-hmm.
I had a question for a VocalEye question for you for later.
Yeah, why don't you wait until till later on, Ben, and you can ask that question.
Yep, I was actually gonna jump off and I'll email you when I have the time.
Great, that's great.
All right, good night, guys.
Good night.
Yeah, the publication, it includes kind of all of the images that were in the exhibition, and with alt text, and then it has an essay written by the curator, Diana Memra.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, good to know.
That's great.
Yeah.
Have a good night, guys.
Night.
Thanks.
Yeah, so we'll send that out in our follow-up, and I think we can include that on the when we put it up on the YouTube, on the good old YouTube, so folks can access that. Yeah, great. Awesome. Okay. So you're going to be with us.
Oh, I think there's another one.
Oh, there's
from
another
Louise.
hand. Here we go. Louise. Come on in, Louise. Thanks for catching that, Fiona.
Okay, hi. Wow.
I know.
I guess because I come from being married, 32 and a half years now. And yes, you go through things in your marriage and everything. And, though they didn't have children, we did. But, just hearing how it was, how you shared it, I can't wait to read more, learn more, but just the fact that it sounds like she was a beautiful artist. I wish I could see the colors because I love color. And it sounded like it was very colorful, the paintings.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they were. Yeah. I
Bright,
love
and
her
sort of
detail.
pastels and bright colors in them or something. I'm not sure if it was any,
Exactly.
Very pastel-y, yeah.
I love pastels, but with some brightness to it. But I think it's the journey that she took us on
Mm.
and how you shared the journey of her life, her marriage, her time with her
Yeah.
husband, but the illness
Mm-hmm.
and what he went through. I think
Mm-hmm.
it makes art this art really, really mean something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel so lucky that she, that I hope that series of paintings, as I said, was kind of healing to her. And then also I hope, I had lots of conversations with people in the gallery about, who had family members who had, who dealt with cancer, and the impact that has on you when it's a loved one, when you're the caregiver as well. We didn't even talk about that, but like would have been, what would have Jane's role been as the caregiver, and how would that have impacted her? Um, so, and yeah, maybe, part of dealing with that was this kind of intense documentation of, every step along the way, that maybe that
Mm-hmm.
helped her to handle it in a, in a way that helped her make sense of it. But yeah, I had so many conversations with people about that, because cancer just impacts everyone, every
Yeah.
family.
So, no, my family member, I'm supporting in caregiving with. There's three of us that do
Mm.
a lot of the caregiving. My mom
Yeah,
and me and my sister support, so she can get out and have time. But the support, the time you spend with that person when they're going through something. My dad doesn't have cancer, but he's got dementia and he's got other health issues, and doesn't matter what they are.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot out of you. It takes a lot of emotion because you go through good and bad times. You go through the hard times with them. You go through the good times with them. They're having a good hour. You celebrate that hour. You
yeah,
know.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
So this tonight was really, really heart filling, but very, very emotional for me in its own way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, Louise. That's really nice
Thank
to
you
hear.
for sharing it the way you did.
Yeah,
I mean, hey, you know what?
thank you.
Sharing it and describing something is so hard because you don't know what someone else has gone through to put it together. You just can put it together and how you should see it and how you saw it. And with your question, Amy, it helped put it together as a real story.
Mm. Thanks, Louise. I appreciate that. Lori's got a hand. I was wondering, Lori, if you'd come in and say something about this. How do you feel, Lori?
Well, I understand about the cancer because I am
Mhm.
a patient. And I also understand about the Alzheimer's because I had an aunt who had Alzheimer's. And I saw
Mm,
how her partner had to take care of her. And
mm,
it's not the nicest thing to see somebody with Alzheimer's. When it got to the
yeah.
end, she said, "Do you want to go see your aunt?" And I said, "No, I
Mm.
wanted to remember her the way she was." So
Mm, mm,
somebody with Alzheimer's, it's a hard situation to
yeah.
see somebody
Yeah.
at 62, at the age 62, die from Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
That's how old my
Mm,
aunt was when she died
oh,
from Alzheimer's. And then how my dad's wife took care of him all the years that he had skin cancer for
mm,
the last 8 years of his life. She was his main caretaker for the last 8 years of
yeah.
his life from cancer. So you know, it's hard. It's hard on the family, and it's hard to see somebody have to take care of somebody else during this time. So all this brings a lot of, you know, a lot of things up to me as a daughter and as a niece, and also as a person who is a cancer patient to
Yeah.
see all this. You know, and this woman, she's gone through a lot, and she's,
Yeah.
you know, she's dealing with her own now of Alzheimer's. She probably doesn't even know much that's going on right now, because that's what's happens with Alzheimer's. You just don't, you don't, your short-term memory just goes out the window with
Yeah.
Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, they say, yeah, she's gone through a lot, and it does feel like a lot, but it's also, there's a kind of banality to it as well. Like there's like so many people um can relate to it, you know,
Yeah.
to it. It's just a life, you know, it's a beautiful, yeah, a beautiful kind of simple life. And but you know, the fact that she was an artist, and so we have access to her incredible interpretations of it, you know, and so putting it in this kind of public space for us.
Yeah.
Did she do art most of her life before she came down with the Alzheimer's?
Oh yes, yeah, from the 70s up until the kind of early 2000s.
Well, so right,
Yeah.
so she's got a lot of pieces.
Yeah.
A lot
Yeah,
of
exactly.
things
Yeah.
you can see. So yeah.
Yeah, this is just a relatively small selection, I think.
Well, thank you for presenting it.
Oh,
Thanks,
thank
Lori.
you.
So, Fiona, pardon my ignorance, but you know way more about art and art culture than I do. Um, is Jane Martin already considered like a really well-known Canadian artist?
Um, I don't, I think, I'm not sure that the answer to that question. I don't think she's taught like in Canadian art history classes.
Yeah.
Like she's not at kind of the level of, a second, who at the level of someone like, shoot, there's the level of someone like a Joyce Wieland,
Mm.
for example, or like a Rebecca Belmore, where there's that kind of name recognition. But I think, you know, she is so, like, she was so prolific and had such a strong kind of artistic community in both Ottawa and Toronto. And, you know, her role in CARFAC, her role in
Yeah.
particularly women's artists' rights, you know, in this country, I think she should be more well known. And so,
Yeah.
you know, an exhibition like this, I think will hopefully help to raise that profile. Yeah.
Yeah. And sadly, often it takes the passing of an artist to be
Yeah, sometimes.
celebrated
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
history. And we don't spend a lot of time celebrating people while they're alive and they know they're being celebrated, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah, it's so nice to have this, yeah, this retrospective while, you know, while she is still alive, because yeah, she knew that you know, even though she couldn't visit it in person, you know, she knew that it happened, and
yeah,
you know, she got to work with Diana and have a really good, you know, conversation and collaboration. So,
yeah.
um, yeah, I'm really glad about that.
And we get to talk about somebody in the present tense.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which is great.
Yeah.
Want to tease us about what's going to be coming up next? Just a tease?
Yes. Yeah. So April 9th, we have another exhibition tour, and this one I'll be just sitting in the background. We're going to bring in the curator of an exhibition called A Dream of Return. And the curator, her name is Pansy Atta. She's Egyptian Canadian. She's, oh, can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, one of my earphones just died. So she is an Ottawa-based curator and artist, and she just finished her PhD at Carleton University. And with this show, it's called A Dream of Return. And basically, her background research interest is in repatriation of cultural objects to communities. So you know, art and different cultural objects that were taken or stolen or quote unquote gifted,
Mhm.
and now so-called belong to Western kind of colonial institutions. So what does return of those objects look like? So that's kind of her background. And so this exhibition is 6 contemporary Canadian artists who are looking at the idea of return in quite a varied way. And what does return look like when, you can go back, but maybe the place has changed or you have changed?
Right.
What does return look like when you can't go back? You're not allowed to go back. And what does return look like in terms, this really expanded way through foodways, through like land-based practices, through cultural practices. So there's textiles, there's paintings, there's video. So it's a really it was a beautiful exhibition as well. So I'm really excited to be able to return to it and have Pansy kind of walk you through that.
Awesome. I'm really, really excited about that. Well, Fiona, I enjoy you every time you bring something to this space. You've been, I don't know, with us probably about 3 times every season, because you usually bring us several exhibitions, and I enjoy them all. I think CUAG is doing some really interesting exhibitions, and I love that they're highlighting Canadian work. Because like I said before, I don't know enough about Canadian artists, and this really expands my knowledge of Canadian art and Canadian works and process and curation, all that stuff. I have no traditional background in any of this stuff as an academic, so this feels really enriching to me to be able to have a guide that takes us through these processes. So thank you so much for joining us in the VocalEye space, and I can't wait till April 9th.
Yay, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for your questions. I love them. And thank you everyone for being such a great audience and for your questions.
Audio now unmuted. Space speech on.
Awesome. Have a good night.
Okay.
We'll check in on you in April.
VocalEye, vocaleye.ca. Special thanks to our funders, the Canada Council for the Arts, the British Columbia Arts Council, the Province of British Columbia, and the City of Vancouver.